Okay, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be back in England to present Dragon Age to you. This is the first time I've been back in the UK to present one of BioWare's games, so you know it's a real privilege for me, and I'm delighted that people have showed up in such numbers. Thank you very much. Okay, we thought what we'd do today is talk a little bit about the art direction of Dragon Age Inquisition. We tend not to do that at conferences. We tend to demo the game and allow you an opportunity to play it, which you can do. We have a multiplayer booth out on the floor. I think some of you here have already had a go, and I urge you to go along and play that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the inspirations and the artistic stylings of Dragon Age, but not for too long, and there is very little text. It's predominantly pictures, so don't worry about that. Okay, so let's crack on. What is the premise of Dragon Age? Dragon Age is a dangerous world. The world of Thedas, it's a rich and culturally vibrant environment. There is danger, there is threat, and what art needs to do in an instant like that is to really support the narrative. So we need to support it and not be in opposition to it. So your decisions matter in this game. The evolution of the game as you play, the decisions that you make, they will fundamentally change the way the experience goes from both a moral and an action-based perspective. So when we think of the world of Dragon Age, we really, we think back to the medieval world, these aspects of memento mori, remember you will die, these concepts of doom, gloom, imminent death hang over the world, and that's very much the light-hearted vein we wanted to keep in Dragon Age when we were working towards it. So where do we search for our inspiration? Okay. Technology does not define good art direction. These two images here, one of them is a wondrous image adored by millions and is one of the cornerstones of Western art. I will leave it to you to decide which one that is, but what they share is that they both share the medium of oil paint. And oil paint in the Renaissance was a new medium, and what you could achieve with it was much better, a richness of surface response. And that was one of the key elements to how we looked at Dragon Age Inquisition and its art direction. So where better to look, and bet you thought you'd never turn up to a game conference and have a lecture on the Northern Renaissance, but we're going to do that anyway. So this is our primary reference. This is the one image that Matthew Goldman, who's the art director of Dragon Age, really loves and really wanted to evangelized throughout the team as a way that Dragon Age could be thought of. It's by the work of Hans Holbein, who's a German painter from the 16th century, I think I'm right, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's Sir Thomas More on the right and Erasmus of Rotterdam on the left, and what you can see from these images is the real vibrancy of color and the way that the light falls on the surfaces. The fur looks like fur, the velvet looks like velvet, and that's the kind of rich, lush art direction and color palette that we wanted to work with. So if you break these down into palettes, you can see where the color ranges lie. And this is really what we wanted to get into the artist's head from the start, that this is a rich, vibrant, diverse world. It's not necessarily, in terms of premise, it's a threatening world, but that doesn't mean that from an aesthetic point of view, it has to be dull or restrained. So what do? We start thinking about that in terms of the concept art of the piece. So the concept artists work with the primary aesthetic goals, and they start to produce their pieces. It's a lush world. There's lots of vibrancy, light. My clicker didn't work. There we go. And also changing the atmospherics and changing the time of day. So it's the same location, but just giving a very different feel, more threatening, more pastel, more ambient. And of course, into the fade to get that more otherworldly experience. And then what we need to do is we need to translate this into the 3D world, so the actual environments that you as players will actually experience. So we want that threatening world. We want that richness of detail, but yet beautiful as well as threatening. So we have the bleak side of Thedas. We also have the more romantic side at night. This is in Crestwood Village, which I think if you saw the E3 trailer from a couple of years ago was set in Crestwood. We have the more mysterious side, potentially threatening. There's the more epic side of things. That's Varric approaching, well, probably impending doom. And of course, a sense of wonder and mystery, as well as the rich the rich civilizations of Orlais, which we haven't really shown before in this kind of level. You see some more of it there. And also the kind of weird otherworldly stuff as envisaged by the Fade. And of course we take this same idea of concept through to the characters. So here's our early concept drawings for the followers and some of the specialists there. Now what we do, we work up from a facial characteristic. And what we want to do is very close to the narrative here. We're working very closely with the writers and the designers. What we want is these faces to appear lived in. We don't want anyone bland. These people have lived lives. They're part of a franchise that's endured through 2 games and novels, a movie, and various comic books. And we want to reflect this life and this potentially hard world within their faces. Also the characteristics from a personality perspective. We see a Cassandra here. She's a fairly brisk individual. She can be abrupt and sharp, and we see these in the angles and planes of her face. And we think about this all the time. So then we take it to the 3D realm. The character artists work with the concepts and bring their own inspirations to these. But what we do, rather than, I've got a couple of screens here, and I think what we're trying to do with these release screens is we want to try and put everything out that really gets into the head of the character themselves. So we don't just shoot a character in a random environment. We think about where they're from, we think about their motivations for the game, and we try and present that in a screenshot form. But also, we're all artists. We understand the importance of composition, color, tone, surface response. So we try and produce an image that is also beautiful to look at. So there's kind of a surface meaning that it's Cole, the new character for the game, but also as an image it stands up to scrutiny as just a nicely composed piece of art. So we have Cole there, we have Liliana. She's of course the spy master, so we've tried to, she's shrouded, there's this, she's framed by this kind of window-like, there's a sense of mystery to that, it's dark in the background, and this all goes to kind of promote that character and that personality. Same with Sarah, she's a new character for Dragon Age Inquisition. She's seen as kind of light-hearted, she's a bit whimsical, and we tried to reflect that in this shot. And then of course Vivienne, an Orlesian, very rich, if you think so 17th century Versailles, we're trying to bring that kind of richness and gold and luster to the screen. And we can also do this with the factions. So I've got a few screens here that will hopefully show how the variety transfers through from the environments to the factions themselves and how this aids ultimately the art direction and for you, the player, to really distinguish what's going on. So we have the members of the Chantry there with their austere, kind of heavy suffering and guilt-laden imagery. And of course the Qunari is much more functional from an architectural standpoint. Various nobles, the Tevintas, all very spiky. And the Inquisition themselves. And the emblem of the Inquisition, the eye. So we're watching you. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is up to you as players and the choices that you make. But there's this idea and concept of always watching, always serving. And you can see how those are built up in terms of recognition from you as the player, with architectural cues and from color cues. And you can see how that follows through from the various factions. And I think what's really nice about Inquisition and about Dragon Age as a franchise in particular is it's kind of evolved its own art style within the game. So we take those early influences, but also stuff evolves. So the stained glass windows, which shows it depicts stories from the lore of Dragon Age within the Chantry. And this has its own kind of graphical style that's really become a hallmark of Dragon Age since DA2. And then what I'm really excited about for this time round is that we have these tarot cards, if you will, for multiplayer choice and for race gender selection. And really the guys are broadening the scope of their inspirations. What we're seeing here is the kind of sort of Eastern European storytelling art that kind of we all grew up with, that just sort of promote that sense of wonder and that sense of storytelling, which is essentially what we're doing. We're promoting a story and promoting a fantasy world. And these are really developed to show the nature of the characters as well. So the Dorian the Mage there is quite a mysterious look. It's in that style of Edmund de Lac, who was a 19th century illustrator of fantasy. And Varric there, I think the one of Varric really picks out essentially what he's all about there, which is a chest. Yeah. And then into the race and gender depictions, which are in a much more classic illustrative style. It kind of harks back to that fantasy storytelling that we all enjoy. And there's also I think there's a real touch of the Baroque, however you want to say it, with the exaggerated posing and the physicality of the figures. I particularly like the center one there. It's not actually linked to the race and gender selection, but I thought it was such a beautiful piece that it deserved to be seen. And then, of course, within the multiplayer, when you're picking the type of player that you want to see, we've got another more illustrative pen and ink style that harks back to the kind of wood-cutting art of the early Renaissance. Okay, so that's the hard bit. In conclusion, build and promote your primary aesthetic direction. That's really getting this idea and getting your prime images, your prime aesthetic sources out there to the rest of the team. Make sure everyone understands that. Make sure people are on board with that. And I think that it's important for people to buy in and to become passionate about what you want to achieve. Gather contextually relevant reference. That's pretty self-explanatory. There's no point searching for sci-fi art when you're doing a fantasy game. But what's really important is we talk about the idea of cultivating a broad inspirational palette. And it's not just looking within games or the fantasy genre. Really broaden your mind to encapsulate movies and books and fine art and sculpture and architecture and poetry and anything else that really turns you on creatively. And use that and transfer it through to the product, because it will be richer and deeper because of it. And remember that art should support the experience and complement the narrative, not be in opposition to either. Game development is it's where three disciplines come together. It's design, well, four in the case of a narrative-led. It's storytelling, design, art, and engineering. And games work best when those four departments work in harmony. And it's dependent on the leads and the artists and the designers being able to cooperate and understand and be passionate about a shared goal. And art which is of value stands up to scrutiny and interpretation. That's an incredibly pretentious thing to say, and I make no apologies for it. As artists, we should have an element of pretentiousness. We like to say that we take our art seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. I think you can take the art of Dragon Age Inquisition and talk about it intelligently and deconstruct it and look at its sources, and it promotes further conversation and it promotes a deeper interest in the narrative of the game. I think that. I hope you do too. Okay, that's all I'm going to say on art direction. So what we're going to do, we're going to run through a 10-minute segment of the Fallow Mire, which is a single-player experience. It's about 2/3 of the game. And what I'd like you to do, I'll try and narrate this as best I can, go in and sort them out. But what I want you to think about here is, this is a very threatening environment, but it's not lacking in color. And our prime considerations for a level like this are in terms of how do we lead you, the player, through it from a visual perspective. And a lot of that has to do with silhouette, with lighting, guiding the player. But that doesn't mean that you can't wander off into the midst. Exploration is a core pillar of Dragon Age Inquisition as an experience. So while we want to guide you through as much as possible so that you can complete the critical path, we also want to encourage you to diverge from that path and wander around. And the way we do that is to basically put interesting stuff on the left and right of the path, so that you're encouraged to just kind of head off into the wherever. What promotes interest from a visual sense? Well, silhouette is a great start. You can see in the distance there that we've got the fortress that you're ultimately going to guide to. And just having that silhouetted, the crenellations, it kind of makes you interested. It promotes excitement, and off you go. We adopted the Frostbite engine for this game, and we talked about surface response and how that can be better realized. You can see this from the ground if you look at the water there. Our technical artists spent a lot of time working on shaders that would give the maximum response, whether it's leather, whether it's metal, whether it's water. We've been working on an idea for a while now of kind of rolling composition. So, composition is traditionally thought of as a static thing. You can compose a frame beautifully. But what we want to do in a game environment, when we're trying to lead you through, is that the rolling composition provides interesting composition on the frame at all times, which is tricky to do because in a 3D world you can wander off wherever you want. So it's important that there's space. You can't just clutter the environment with stuff and hope people try and make sense of it visually. You can't do it. So what we try and do is the negative space is important as the positive. So the torches on the stairway there are a fairly unsubtle encouragement to just kind of progress that way. That's a fairly toasty way to die. And I hope all you'll notice from this as well, it's a dark area, it's set at night, the weather's fairly gloomy. It still has a rich aesthetic. It's not desaturated, it's colorful, it's vibrant. It's a living space. Which the cinematic there was just to guide you through. And in terms of the cinematics, we're very much, the cinematic direction for Dragon Age is very traditional. We wanted it to be shot as if you had a physical rig. There's no extreme camera pans that you can do with motion captured rigs. It's all as if you had a physical 70mm Panavision camera that you could dolly and put on tracks. I think that harkens back to those kind of fantasy movies that, well, certainly I loved as a kid. The things like Conan and that sort of thing, where it's all very traditional. Cinematically, it's very traditional. It relies on wonderful lighting and beautiful composition. And Arnold, of course, lest we forget. So again, lots of framing there, the brightness in the background, the holes in the roof that allow shards of light that focus on the gameplay area. And there's a little nod to what can be achieved if, once the combat is finished. There's illuminated side chambers there, just with a little bit of torchlight. And here we're going to move into TACCAM. So the combat was obviously getting a bit too much for whoever was playing this. And that's the great thing about Dragon Age. If you're finding the combat too challenging or you want to approach it in a different way, then you can go into TACCAM, freeze the action, move around, and use your party a little bit more strategically. And it's just a different way of playing. It doesn't preclude you playing from a third-person perspective, but it gives you a more fulfilling experience if you swap and choose between the two. So obviously struggling to dispatch this guy. And of course, you know, there's multiple abilities, each with their own set of VFX. Again, the VFX add that extra layer of richness and lushness and color and vibrancy. You know, there's a lot going on. One of the problems we have as a creative team is sometimes to scale down the effects because they become too much. If you have a party of 4, 5 with enemies, they're all shooting off spells and abilities left, right, and center, then it can be overwhelming for you as a player, and it becomes difficult to actually understand what's going on. So we've consciously scaled some of that down so that you can understand and the combat does make sense, and you can make strategic decisions without having to guess. So I think I'm just going to upgrade there. There's extensive customization, as I'm sure you would expect from an RPG of this size. And they've completed the mission. There are the soldiers. And it's another blow for the Inquisition. We've increased our power. The way you progress through the game really is to increase your power and influence over the world. Again, you'll see the framing there, the silhouette. There's no debate about who is the the premier character in this scene. We use the archway to silhouette. We use the backlighting. If you're really lucky, we get a nice lightning charge behind it that really adds to the effect. But it's random, so.
Join me. Help us stop the breach.
Is this why the lady of the skies will be? To help heal the wounds in her skin? No, I'll join you. Let me make peace with my kid and I'll find where you set your flight.
And there we go. He's going to join the Inquisition, and you have increased your strength and influence in this particular area. And increasing that strength and influence allows you to progress through the game more quickly. Okay, so that was the game demo.